Yeah, we just got back from a day of fishing. Talked to you about how the bite was this past week. I got Jack with me. We're catching bass and pike today. We chased some panfish, but this week was pretty consistent with what we've been seeing, and today especially. We got the nice warm sun above us. It's been hot. It's going to be 80 degrees today. We've seen that most of the week, and those fish are in their summer patterns. So as you're out there fishing, kind of think about where fish are going to go when it gets super hot. The next week or so is going to be hot as well. I think we have 80s, maybe 90 again. And we'll go show you some of the stuff we've been using this last week and how we've been catching our fish. Everything from your bass, your pike, into your panfish. So to start things off, you know, we've beaten a jig worm with a dead horse. And one thing we've done a little differently recently, because the fish are a little more aggressive and they're schooling up a little easier. So when you get that fish, you want to get that second one right away. And you're fishing a little deeper. So I've gone to a little heavier mushroom style head. And I'm actually biting off a Kamita. A lot of guys call this the Ned rig. And it's a little longer than a Ned rig. I'm only taking about an inch off that Kamita and threading it on there, and I'm fishing that like a jig worm. Long wired hook, really heavy. You can get down there a little faster than those thin wire mushroom heads that we showed you last week. So I'm fishing a little heavier jig worm so I can get down there quick. I'm using a spinning rod, medium heavy action. I'm actually fishing like a 10 or 20 pound braid, because where I've been fishing and taking clients recently, we've been catching a lot of pike, even muskies. And when you're fishing along heavier weeds, I'm fishing right on that weed line. I haven't seen a big reason to not use braid. You can use a monofilament or a fluorocarbon too. This is just a 20 pound vicious braid, 2500 series Shimano reel, and I've really fallen in love with that new Jason Mitchell Elite Series rod. This happens to be just the 6'6" medium heavy action rod, so I can rip them out of that heavier cover. Jack's got that frog there in his hand. You like that one, don't you, buddy?
Yeah.
He's caught some bass on that. Frog fishing this time of year can be very successful. You can pitch around lily pads, around the dock areas, around the scum weeds, especially in low light conditions like sunrise, sunset. Even the heat of the day. You know, one of my friends, John LaHood, he works at Clam Outdoors. He smoked the fish on a frog earlier last week. They caught like 30 fish in the middle of the day from like noon to 4. So the frog bite can be good. That's a fun way to fish, especially with the kids. Quick tip when you're fishing the frog though. You're going to cast it out there. You don't set the hook off of feel or sight. We're often taught as bass fishermen, hook sets are free. So when that fish bumps it, we set the hook. When you're fishing a topwater frog, you want to wait a second or two until you set the hook. So if you see that blow up, if you feel that bump, what I always do is I reel down towards the fish, pointing at the fish, 1, 1,000, 2, 1,000, and then set the hook. I bet you get a lot more hookups instead of that bait flying back to the boatie at Mach speed. But this is one Jack likes to fish, the frog. Next, we've been drop shotting. We've been drop shotting heavily for a lot of our species, whether it's your bass, your walleyes, your panfish. And what we've been catching lately is these fish are on the weed lines. They're schooling up. They're chasing small bluegills, crappies, shad, shiner minnows, whatever it might be. So I've been drop shotting that sassy shad from Mr. Twister. This is a 4-inch version that comes in a 3-inch, 2, 3, and 4 inches. Both work well. I'm drop shotting this, just nip hooking this. It gives you a little bit of thump, a little bit of appeal. So what I'm doing is actually fishing these bass aggressively on the drop shot. I'm pitching that drop shot. I wrote an article a year or so back on pitching with drop shots, and that works really well for catching big bass. The pike are gobbling this up too. And if you go down to the 3-inch version, you're getting walleyes on that drop shot. So if you haven't tried that ever popular sassy shad, you probably have, but probably on a jig head. Try it on the drop shot. I think you might like that difference in profile. What else have you been using, Jack? What else do you like catching fish with?
I think I used what was it, the shallow crankbait?
Yep.
I think, yeah, the shallow crankbait in the rivers. It's really good, and some spinner baits, drop shots.
Yeah, the shallow crankbait was good in the river because we were fishing just shallow diving Shimano or Salmo crankbaits, so they wouldn't get snagged up in some of the weeds and some of the rocks. So that shallow water bait's a lot of fun to fish on the river especially. And you are fishing some deeper crankbaits. I was throwing a DT16 and even a DT20 from Rapala the other day to catch big bass. The pike were chowing on them. Mike Farrell's been trolling those DT baits on the weed lines, guiding out on Lake Minnetonka, catching a lot of big pike. It's been a very consistent approach for catching a number of fish. When it gets down to the panfish bite is actually good right now. A lot of guys and gals will usually turn away from panfish in the summertime because they get discouraged because they can't catch them under a float up against shallow cover. You can, but they're often smaller. I encourage you to upsize a little bit. Go to like a 2-inch twister tail, or that VIE shiner minnow from Mr. Twister has been awesome on big bluegills and crappies, and I will drop shot this. I know it sounds like a broken record, but I drop shot a lot in the summertime. I'll drop shot that little minnow bait. It's a little under 2 inches in length. It's got a nice little double paddle tail. You can fish this underneath a float if you wanted to, underneath a jig. But when you get on the outside weed line, that's where the big bluegills and the crappies are. Turn to a 1.5 to 2 inch profile bait right now, and you'll be surprised on what you catch on some of those. What else? What do you think?
Maybe what else? I think I have something back here that I like to use. What is it? All right.
Jack's going to show you one more secret weapon here, and then we'll
The crawfish.
the pocket craw from Mr.
Pocket
Twister.
craw.
That's a good bait. And what's
I
that
like
rig down? A
using
jig head?
these. Yeah, I use these a lot at my cabin, and I catch some really big
Show it to 'em.
really big bass and pike and whatever you guys call it, and that's what I use a lot.
And there's that pocket craw. Love that bait. You can flip this bait, you can punch this bait. This happens to just be on a jig head, rigged weedless. So you can pitch it around cover, you can pitch it around deep weed lines, you can pitch it around docks. A very versatile bait. So again, we threw a lot at you. The key this time of year, get on the outside weed line, fish deeper, try to visualize what you're fishing. I know as anglers we like to see what we're casting at. You know, when it's a time of year where you have to kind of trust what's down there, visualize what's down there, pay attention to your depth finder, look for schooling fish. Those big bass are schooling up, the walleyes are schooling up, the panfish, the crappies are moving onto the weed lines, they're schooling up. So get out a little deeper, you know, have a little faith in some of your electronics, have a little faith in some of your gear, so fish a little heavier so you can get down there. Big rule, keep contact with the bottom if you're fishing bass, if you're fishing walleyes. If you're fishing panfish, look for fish on your locator, that sort of stuff. I got my Vexilar mounted right behind Jack, right up front on my universal sonar. I use that just like I do in ice fishing season to find schooling fish, your crappies, your bluegills, all that sort of stuff, and stay after them. So don't get discouraged this time of year. It's going to be warm, it's going to be hot. Get out there, have some fun, be safe, enjoy the summer, put the suntan lotion on, and we'll catch you next week. Right, bud?
Yeah.